So there are actually three Shimakaze ships in the history of the Japanese Navy, but depending on what you're doing with your life, the one that comes to mind is probably one of these things. But before I talk about the IJN Shimakaze, I'll just briefly go over the other ships. The first Japanese destroyer Shimakaze was one of the 15 Minakaze class destroyers completed on November 15, 1920. She was converted into a patrol boat in 1940 to serve in the Pacific War as Patrol Boat Number 1. Now the JS Shimakaze DDJ-172 is one of the two Hatakaze-class guided missile destroyers currently serving in the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. She was launched on January 30th, 1887. The first two Shimakaze destroyers built had powerful engines which allowed them to travel extremely quickly for their time. This is why they were given the name Shimakaze, meaning island wind in Japanese. Also, in case you don't know, generally a destroyer is a fast, maneuverable, and long-endurance warship used to escort larger vessels and defend them against short-range attackers. Now, the Imperial Japanese Navy's Shimakaze of 1942 was an experimental destroyer that was intended to be the lead ship in a new Type C class of destroyers. One of its most distinctive features was its 15 torpedo tubes, a device for launching torpedoes, which were all capable of firing the 610mm Type 93 Long Lance torpedo, one of the most advanced naval torpedoes in the world at the time. The ship was ordered to be built in 1939 under the 4th Naval Armament Supplement Program, one of the armament expansion plans of the Imperial Japanese Navy, IJN. Construction formally started at the Maizuru Naval Arsenal on August 8, 1941, and was completed on May 10, 1943. Under the 5th Naval Armament Supplement Program of 1941, funding for 16 Shimakaze-class destroyers was provided, and there was even a long-term plan to build a total of 32 vessels. However, due to its experimental and complex design, along with limited industrial capacity and resources during the war, no other Shimakaze-class destroyers were built. The plan, called Project Number V6, was to develop a mass production destroyer based on the Shimakaze, which would be called the Super Shimakaze class destroyers. However, after Japan's navy was devastated at the Battle of Midway in June 1942, this plan was cancelled. The design was ultimately too complex and too expensive to be easily mass-produced during the war when resources were already spread so thin. Shimakaze's design was based on the Yugumo-class destroyer, with an additional 25 feet of length added to mount an additional quintuple torpedo launcher in the middle of the ship. Shimakaze had one of the largest torpedo capacities of any World War II destroyer, but this additional weight made the design top-heavy, so no torpedo reload was carried. Yugumo's main battery, anti-aircraft battery, and anti-submarine capabilities remained part of the Shimakaze. Similarly to most other Japanese destroyers, Shimakaze's main battery had quite a low rate of fire and was slow to turn. Shimakaze's most distinctive feature, however, was her new experimental high-temperature and high-pressure compound boilers, which generated 79,240 shaft horsepower, 59,090 kilowatts. They powered a new type of steam turbine, which generated 50% more power than typical turbines used in previous destroyers. In the planning phase, she was expected to reach a speed of 39 knots, but on her trials on April 7, 1943, she reached a speed of 40.9 knots, 75.75 kilometers per hour, or 47.7 miles per hour. During the World War II era, the French destroyer Le Terrible recorded a speed of 45 knots, and the Soviet destroyer Tashkent achieved a speed of 43 knots. This meant that Shimakaze was the third fastest destroyer of its time, a huge accomplishment. Her standard displacement was 2,610 tons, or about 2.4 million kilograms, but fully loaded with ammunition, crew, and such, she had a weight of 3,400 tons, about 3.1 million kilograms. She had 3 compound water tube boilers, 2 compound impulse-geared steam engines, and 2 shafts where energy is brought from the main engine to the propeller. She had a range of 6,000 nautical miles, 11,000 kilometers, or 6,900 miles, at 18 knots, 33 kilometers per hour, or 21 miles per hour. She had a crew of 267 in May 1943. But since Shimakaze was such a unique ship, she was never assigned to any individual destroyer's division and basically just operated independently within the squadron structure. After Shimakaze was fully built at Maizuru on May 10, 1943, she was assigned to the IJN First Fleet, the main battleship fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy, and the commander Hirose Hihomu was appointed as her captain. For better or for worse, due to delays in her construction, she was able to be fitted with the latest and most advanced equipment. She was one of the first Japanese warships to mount a radar when completed. After her crew finished their training, she participated in the evacuation of Japanese troops from Kishika Island toward the end of the Aleutian Island campaign from July 22nd to August 1st, 1943, serving as flagship and radar guide for the screening force, the group's tasked with scouting and giving early warnings to main groups of battleships during the evacuation of Kishika. From August 3rd to October 10th, she basically just escorted the Maya, Chokai, Chuyo, and Taiyo to and from Yokosuka and Truk. From October 17th to the 26th, she escorted a fleet from Truk to Eniwetok due to anticipated U.S. carrier raids. Throughout November, she continued to escort ships and tankers to and from Truk and Yokosuka. Between December 1943 and February 1944, she escorted tankers between Truk, Saipan, Palau, Davao, and Balikpapan. Later on, after escorting the Akitsushima from Palau to Yokosuka from March 4th to 14th, she docked at Kure Naval Arsenal for refitting from March 17th to April 12th. She continued to escort fleets and ships from April to May, and from June 10th to 12th she escorted the Yamato and Musashi from Tawi-Tawi to Batjan to support Biak troop transport operations. On June 30th, 1944, during repairs and refits at the Kure Naval Arsenal, her anti-aircraft capabilities were enhanced with these guns and Type 13 and 22 radars. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf from October 23rd to 25th, Shimakaze escorted Admiral Kurita's 1st Division attack force. On October 24th, she saved survivors of the Maya from the sinking Musashi. Due to the large number of survivors she was carrying, she stayed at the rear end of the fleet during the Battle off Samar. Due to her position in the fleet, along with the survivors she had on board, she played no role in the battle and did not use her torpedoes. Actually, her payload of torpedoes were some of the most powerful in the world at the time and could have sunk or have done significant damage to heavily armored battleships. Her experimental design was a success, it just came too late to change the outcome of the war. And despite not actively participating in the battle, she still suffered minor damage due to air attacks and a minor collision with the Akishimo. She later returned to Manila on October 31st. On November 4th, Shimakaze became the flagship of the destroyer Squadron 2 under Rear Admiral Hayakawa Mikio. From November 9th to 11th, Shimakaze led an escort of a troop convoy from Manila to Ormoc. After that, she was attacked by American aircraft from Task Force 38 on November 11, 1944, during the Battle of Ormoc Bay. She drifted while on fire for the entire afternoon before exploding and sinking in the Ormoc Bay. A total of 131 survivors were rescued, but this number included rescued crewmen from Wakatsuki, so the number of survivors from the Shimakaze is unknown. Rear Admiral Mikio Hawakawa did not survive, and Shimakaze was removed from the Navy list on January 10, 1945. It was only until December 1, 2017 that Shimakaze was discovered by an expedition in Ormoc Bay, 218 meters or 715 feet below the surface. The ship was a complete wreck, but her 3 quintuple torpedo tube launchers confirmed her identity. Some historians debated whether or not she had one of her turrets removed in an early 1944 refit, but the wreck debunked this theory. Shimakaze was a successful design that made many technological innovations, but ultimately Shimakaze took a leading role in the evacuations of force from Kishika, and outside of that, she basically did nothing besides escort warships, despite her enormous potential. Okay, so that's the history of the IJN Shimakaze. In terms of her legacy, there's not much to talk about in the decades that followed her sinking. However, this all changed after she was added to the warship games of today. The majority of people that have heard of the Shimakaze know about her thanks to what I'm calling the Big 4 warship games: War Thunder, World of Warships, Kancolle, and Azure Lane. So the first of these games to release a playable Shimakaze was Kancolle. This game was officially released on April 23, 2013, and Shimakaze was one of the ships instantly available to play. In case you don't know, Kancolle is a game, only available in Japan, that is 3 million registered players who use cards depicting World War II era warships as ship girls. Honestly, Kancolle is better described as a community rather than a game, sort of like Toho. A lot, if not the majority, of people in the community do not play the game, they just participate in things like the art, cosplay, and music scene surrounding Kancolle. Kancolle was extremely popular after its release. Hashtag Kancolle was the most used hashtag among Japanese Twitter users in 2013, and the game was also the 8th most searched term in Japan on Google the year of its release. But now back to the focus of this video. Shimakaze's personality in the game is described by the Kancolle fandom as, quote, hyperactive and excitable, but is also absent-minded. She prides herself as being the fastest in her fleet and boasts about her speed very frequently. Outside of the Kancolle community, she is certainly one of the most recognizable and well-known characters in the franchise. But as the first major game to introduce warships as so-called ship girls, there is some controversy surrounding the morality of this. It centered around accusing the game of glorifying Japanese aggression in World War II while depicting warships built for destruction as, this. But today the controversy surrounding the game has mostly waned. Actually, a manga dedicated to Shimakaze was released on December 27, 2013. It was called Kantai Collection Shimakaze Shimujikaze no Shoujo, Shimakaze Girl of the Whirlwind, and it's basically about her growing as a person, fighting off an abyssal, and just living her daily life with friends. Later on, they also made a Kancolle anime released from January 8, 2015 to March 26, 2015. Shimakaze was in the anime, but it's worth noting that she isn't a main character in either the game or anime. Zekamashi is just popular enough to get her own manga. I read both the manga and anime, and honestly, they're just fine. Personally, I'd only recommend them if you're a fan of the series or have a good grasp of it. They're not terrible, they just aren't worth checking out for the average person, in my opinion. But yeah, on Pixiv, one of the largest digital art sharing platforms and online communities for artists in Japan and East Asia, Shimakaze is also very popular. At the time of writing this video, hashtag Shimakaze is tagged on a total of 31,859 works on the website, including 27,473 illustrations, 3,677 manga, and 209 novels. But while Shimakaze was becoming extremely popular in Japan and abroad, World of Warships was also working on its own World War II ship game. World of Warships Alpha started in December 2013, and Shimakaze was one of the first ships to be released into the game, in version 0.1.2. She's a Tier X ship in the game, the highest tier, and is the last ship in the Japanese torpedo destroyer tech tree branch. Like the real-life ship, the endgame Shimakaze has an unmatched number of torpedoes that can be launched all at once. This spamming of torpedoes is known as the wall of skill in the game. She's sometimes called Shima in the community, and players who use her have to be extremely stealthy while typically trying to annoy everyone else with their torpedoes. Afterwards, in War Thunder, Shimakaze entered the game on September 11, 2020. Similarly to World of Warships, she can launch over 15 torpedoes at once, dealing deadly amounts of damage. She's a rank 3 ship in the game, the max level is 5. In War Thunder, she's basically just a torpedo spammer. And finally, Shimakaze was released as an ultra-rare ship in Azur Lane, the highest rank in the game. Like the games above, one of her greatest strengths is her high torpedo DPS. Her personality is centered around her high energy and high spirit, and she is also very proud of her speed. For both Azur Lane and Kancolle Shimakazes, their high speeds are their pride and raison d'etre. Furthermore, in Warship Girls, which some describe as a Chinese version of Kancolle, Shimakaze is another playable ship girl. However, unlike Kancolle, Warship Girls has playable ships from many nations that fought in World War II, like the US, Germany, UK, and so on. In another game, Battle of Warships, Shimakaze is one of the most powerful ships in the game, and is the final destroyer to be unlocked. In the community, she's known as the Annoying Brick, in due part to her destructive torpedoes like all other games. Even outside of gaming community, Shimakaze is well respected among war historians and enthusiasts. She had enormous potential to be one of the most impactful destroyers of the Japanese Navy, but she ended up having few opportunities to use her torpedoes. But she did not fight in the Battle off Samar to protect the 100 plus crewmen she had saved from a sinking ship. Some would say that she was a ship born in the wrong era, but her legend lives on thanks to the war games of today. And what better legacy to have than bringing happiness to millions of people around the world. And that's the end of the video. I think this is probably going to be the longest video I've ever named, but yeah, I hope you enjoy. It's also kind of different from my normal content, but I don't know, I like it. I'll probably do something like this in the future. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching.